Welcome! In this short training video, we will be going over the Personal Services Expenses budget category that includes the position title, salary, and fringe benefits on page 2, and the personal narrative that supports these budget lines on page 3 of the Multi-Year Contract Budget Development Form. Everything in this top section will be pre-filled for you based on what you have already entered on page 1 of this form. Before you begin entering your budget, remember to save your work often in CMS by clicking on the Submit button at the bottom of the budget page. We will first look at the position title column. You will see we have entered multiple position title examples using job titles 1 through 9 and volunteer or volunteers. You will need to use the job titles that are applicable to your program and list each position on its own line. The position titles that you use in your budget must also match what you use in your work plan. Do not list staff names or initials on these budget lines, just the titles. When contracting with New York State, you are being paid for the position title and its duties and responsibilities as described in the budget narrative and work plan. In the PA column, you must indicate for each position whether that position will be doing programmatic, P, or administrative, A, work. If the position will be doing both programmatic and administrative work, you must create 2 separate lines with the same position title, as shown in the Job Title 8 example. The annual salary that you enter here should be the equivalent to a full-time annual or 12-month salary for that position at the start of the grant year, not the amount you plan to charge for the position against the grant. For example, for Job Title 2, the starting salary is $46,018 for a 12-month position beginning in budget year 1. However, in budget year 1, the salary charged is $36,814, which doesn't match the annual salary. Let's look at how the budget narrative for Job Title 2 supports this. As we look at the percent of time on project, we see this position is supported by OCFS and by local share. The annual salary that you enter should also include all anticipated raises you are going to give within the first budget year, if applicable. The salary listed for each position should be based on a full-time employee, or FTE, regardless of their percentage of time on the project. In the percentage of time on project column, you must enter the percentage of time for each title that will be allocated to work on this project based on the salary of a full-time equivalent, or FTE, in this position. Next to each position, you will enter the total percentage of time to be worked on the project. While most positions in this sample budget are listed at 100% time on the project, Job Title 1 is listed at 96% of time on the project. Job Title 8 is listed at 2% of time on the project under its programmatic role and 1% under its administrative role. Please note that each position in the budget must calculate accurately for the budget years and total percentage of time on the project. For example, for Job Title 2, you will see that this position is listed at 100% of time on this project. However, in budget years 1 through 5, there is not 100% of salary charged to OCFS funds. The difference between the annual salary and the salary charged to OCFS for this position is accounted for by local share or match. Let's look at how the budget narrative for Job Title II supports this. As we look at the percent of time on the project, we see this position is supported by 80% OCFS and by 20% local share match, which makes up the total of 100% of time on this project. If local share match is required for your grant award, this is outlined in your award letter and/or instructions on developing your contract. Under each budget year, you will list the annual salary for each position. When entering the salary for each position, be sure to use whole dollars and no cents to avoid any technical issues in completing and finalizing your contract. The budget lines for salary should include all anticipated salary increases, including cost of living allocations or COLAs, performance-based and/or union-based increases, and/or bonuses for each budget period. If salary increases are subject to the approval of a board, executive director, etc., we request that all contractors do their best to project salary increases over the course of the term of the contract. Building in a projected increase with each annual budget period will give a more realistic expectation of how you will sustain staffing. For example, in Job Title VI, the starting salary listed in the annual salary column is $31,218. The starting salary should include all raises, longevity, and COLAs given at the beginning of year 1. The percentage of time charged in year 1 would match the total time on the project. We can determine that there are increases to the salary for budget years 2 through 5, as the salary is higher in these years than the salary listed in year 1. Let's look at how the narrative for Job Title VI supports this. We can see that this reads, salary includes an anticipated or approximate 2% annual performance raise and an annual $500 longevity payment. This is where you want to document changes to the salary. If you have part-time employee positions, you should still list the salary with a full-time annual salary. The percentage of time will show that they are only part-time based on the time they will be working on the project. These positions should also include any annual salary increases. For example, Job Title VII is considered part-time because they are less than 100% time on project. They have a full-time annual salary and are only listed at 50% of time on the project. If you have hourly employee positions and they will never receive a full-time annual salary, then the salary will reflect the hourly wages and include abbreviation of HRLY next to the position title. You can see an example of this next to Job Title IX. Please be aware that hourly employees are very rare in most contracts. If you need assistance on this, you should work with your OCFS program manager. If you have a position that is 100% supported by local share, they will not be charging any salary to OCFS funds. In this situation, you would enter $0 in the salary column for the appropriate budget periods. For example, let's look at the volunteers listed on the last budget line. In this example, the volunteers are listed as 100% percentage of time on this project, with no funds listed in the budget to be charged to OCFS. Next, we will go over the fringe benefits line that is part of the personal services expenses budget category. On the A2 fringe benefits line, you will enter the amount of fringe benefits needed for each budget year. In this example, you will see we have entered different amounts per year, as the personal services subtotal line also varies in amounts per year. You want to be sure to allocate the appropriate amount of fringe based on your program funding needs. If you have position titles allocated to admin, such as Job Title 8, you must take any administrative fringe expenses for those positions into consideration when calculating your total administrative cap. Your administrative cap will vary depending on your funding source, which you can find in the contract documents called your Program Terms and Conditions. If you need assistance with finding this information, please reach out to your OCFS program manager. The total fringe benefits charged should not exceed the current approved rate. This rate can be found on the Office of the State Comptroller's website at the address on your screen. Click on Agencies at the top and then Guide to Financial Operations at the bottom right under Resources. The current approved rate is in Chapter 7, .9, .A. This information is found in the Contract Development Instructions. While we have already looked at some pieces of the narrative, we will now look at it more closely. When completing the narrative section, there are several important things to include. List each position title. Be sure to list position titles in the same order as you listed them within the budget line items section on page 2A, Personal Services Expenses. Include all staff positions that support the work plan. Even positions covered by local share should be listed in the budget and described within the narrative. Within the budget narratives, do not list any dollar amounts associated with your narratives or line items unless requested by OCFS. The personal services narrative should briefly describe the roles and responsibilities of each position and how this relates to the work plan. Be sure to include direct supervision language for any title listed in the staffing plan. For an example, in Job Title 2, it lists that this position will supervise job titles 3, 4, 5, and 6. Your narrative could also state this position oversees job titles 3, 4, 5, and 6. Both examples are acceptable. Remember, as previously stated, do not include staff names or initials with the position titles. The narrative must also include a breakdown of the percentage of time spent on the project for each year. If the percentage of time is not the same for each year and/or includes local share to support the percentage of time on the project, then this must also be included in the narrative. Let's look at a couple of examples. Let's look at Job Title 1. As we look at the narrative for this position, we see that this position breaks down the percentage of time on the project as 78.08% in OCFS funds and 17.92% in local share match for a total of 96% on the project for all 5 years. If the percentage of time on the project will be different from one budget year to another, then this must be documented in the Personal Services narrative. Let's look at Job Title 3. In the narrative under the percentage of time on the project, we can see that this position breaks down the percentage of time for years 1 through 3 as 95% of time for OCFS with 5% local share match, and for years 4 through 5 as 75% of time for OCFS and 25% local share match. Let's look at another example narrative, this time for volunteers. If you recall, they were listed as 100% percentage of time on this project, with no funds in the budget to be charged to OCFS. In the narrative for volunteers, you will see this position listed with local share years 1 through 5 equal to 100% of time on the project for all 5 years. This is the appropriate way to document the local share in a narrative. As previously mentioned in the salary section, your budget lines should include all anticipated salary increases. As we look at this budget narrative for Job Title 1, we see that the narrative discusses raises, COLAs, and longevity payments. If raises are not guaranteed or need to be approved by a union, a board, or are based on an employee's performance, you can add words into the narrative such as, "This position includes an anticipated performance-based raise that must be approved by the union or the board." If an hourly employee is on payroll, then the budget narrative should reflect that they are paid hourly and that the hourly rate is subject to change. The narrative should also provide the approximate range of hours this position will be working. For example, let's look at Job Title 9. You may write something like, "This position is an hourly employee and hourly pay ranges from approximately $15 to $20 an hour, starting rate based on experience and education. This position will work an approximate 15 to 20 hours per week as needed for the program." Using the word approximate and having a range gives you flexibility for this position versus having a fixed number of hours per week and then having to adjust it later in the contract. Just like in the A1 Personal Services section of the budget, here in the narrative, you must also indicate whether this position will be doing programmatic, P, or administrative, A, work. If the position will be doing both programmatic and administrative work, you must create 2 separate narratives with the same title. For example, let's look at Job Title 8. Here you will see Job Title 8, marked P, with a narrative description that explains what programmatic work will be done. You will also see a Job Title 8, marked A, that explains what administrative duties will be done. Here are some additional tips. When planning your budget, we strongly suggest developing your personal services budget before you work on any other budget categories. Please note that for most grant awards, your annual budget amount stays the same and funds cannot be rolled over to other budget periods. We hope you found this video helpful. To continue completing your expense-based budget, please watch the next video.